Pickle Mark, but I rented a car. And she goes, could you give me a ride somewhere? And it happened a lot. And I said, yeah, sure, wherever. And she goes, I have to go to the prison. And I said, oh, why do you have to go to the prison? She said, don't you know? There's a lot of that. She said, don't you know? We go every 3 days a week at so-and-so o'clock. We go to the door of the prison and we meet the prisoners as the people as they're released. And I said, why do you do that? And she said, well, because we're taking a survey. Don't you know? The prison, and I went to see it. This is a photo of the Orleans parish prison. Didn't look like that. Different one. The city lockup was flooded. It's a really tall skyscraper. This is where photos would come in handy. It's a really tall skyscraper, and the first 2 to 3 floors were basically flooded out. It's actually been documented on a few media channels, alternatives such as Democracy Now!, that prisoners during Katrina suffered unbelievable pains. And of course, people say, well, they're prisoners, but you know, you could be in there for, I don't know, smoking weed. Yeah. And prisoners had to endure, you know, being flooded. I mean, they were, you know, water level rising as they're in the cell, and then later they were taken out and put on the highway. This story has gotten some attention, you know, held at gunpoint on the highway, and you're just standing there waiting for the, I don't know, the rescue to come. And, I mean, there's some discussion of, you know, who was shot or... Anyway, the girl says, I'm going to the prison. We survey everybody. As they come out of the prison, we ask them questions. I said, well, what do you ask them? Well, they're in a temporary prison, and it wasn't really, it doesn't have the facilities for this many people, typical American story, but even worse in New Orleans. And it also was damaged in the storm. So there is probably, first of all, we can't get in. They don't let any visitors see the inside of the prison. We have to wait outside. Because the old prison had a proper system, this new one doesn't have it, so you don't have to go inside. You're not allowed. They don't want you to know what's going on inside. But as people come out, so you could be arrested on being drunk, which happens in New Orleans. You could be arrested on being drunk the night before, picked up, and in theory, you should be released the next day. But as is the case in the United States these days, you can be held longer because it's an emergency situation, because there was a hurricane, therefore all of our laws go kind of out the window. So people are being held longer, and there are cases of people being picked up for drunken disorderly and held for, I don't know, weeks or more. The thing is, if that's not bad enough, they're coming out sick. They're coming out with respiratory diseases. They're coming out, they're going in just drunk, they're coming out extremely sick. And so they're also getting beaten. We don't know about that. They're getting packed into all in the same cell, excessive amounts of people. And one of the popular things on the survey, I saw them, was that the toilets don't work. So there's just shit everywhere. And that's how they live. So these legal people, it was their task to go and interview and ask, how were you treated? Did you see black mold on the wall? Because that is dangerous for the respiratory system. And I couldn't believe it. So I went to the prison. I mean, I went to the outside of the prison, and sure enough, people were coming out. They were interviewing them. The place looked like Guantanamo. And I can say that because we've seen enough photos of Guantanamo. The part that I drove around, I saw very scary. This is one of these issues that the media doesn't care enough about. And why? Well, because prisoners, you know, they're not very big in the news audience, not big enough for them to be so concerned about them, because it's an uncomfortable topic. Maybe some people were murderers, and there's a very big spirit that says, well, if a person's in prison, they're probably bad anyway. But of course, as we know, the great quote by Dostoevsky, which it's not because he said it that it's true, but it's true. The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons, and if that's so, then American society is fucked. I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those things, you know. Do you clap? One of the minor details, and I'm running out of time, was, and you guys will like this, in the storm, and bloggers were very good about telling this, because they work there. You know, the guy who works in the municipal building blogs at night, and he said, by the way, a lot of our records for, what did he say? Mortgages, prison records, they're kept in the basement. Yeah, the servers too. And when the water level rose, these things were lost. Now, all of you very smart people will say, well, it's network, so somewhere else the files are kept. True, but evidence, you know, the fingerprinting, well, maybe they have that, but the evidence baggies with your case, maybe you're in jail, but you're awaiting trial, they lost most, if not all, of that. And so there's a big crisis going on because there are prisoners running around, the evidence has been lost, and they're in jail, and in some cases, they don't know how many more years they have to serve out. There have been stories coming out about prisoners who have been lost in the system. Evidence that has been lost, your case, your details. And bloggers, Gulf Sales is one of them, but he's not the only, have talked a lot about what they've seen, what they've noticed, and, you know, asked questions. I mean, this is what they do well. And I've learned a lot with them. Dismantling education, it goes along with everything else I've just said. They are using the fact that Katrina is going on, and bloggers are on the forefront of this because there's a lot of teachers blogging, former teachers, because most of them were fired. All the ones part of the union were fired. They're creating charter schools. And a charter school is a very complex thing, but it is, in essence, run like a business. And they decided, with money from Laura Bush, the Laura Bush Foundation was a big contributor, they decided to start charter schools in New Orleans to replace the public schools. And they've made these decisions while most people are not home. And there's no federal money for education. That was something I talked a lot about with people. Some people really liked the new cool schools they were building. The problem was, this was for the wealthy people. They were in neighborhoods that were not damaged. I can't go much into education, I'm running out of time. Pumps was a popular issue when I met certain bloggers. You know, New Orleans gets flooded, or can get flooded, relatively on a normal amount. It happens. So they have a system of pumps, much like in the Netherlands, I guess we have. I live in the Netherlands. And the funny thing is, they had these old pumps, and they got really damaged in Katrina, so they ordered new ones. There was some money for that. And then coincidentally, they ordered it from a company that's a friend of Jeb Bush, Moving Water Industries. And as it turns out, they spent a couple million, I don't have the number with me, but they spent many millions on these pumps, and they don't fit. They don't fit. So why did they give the contract to this particular pump company? I don't know. But this is one of those issues that, I mean, there's a blogger that has dedicated his whole blog to fix, it's called Fix the Pumps, and I think now he's actually gotten work as a journalist, which is an interesting side effect of doing this kind of work. You start off as your own person and you're independent. Sometimes if people like what you do, you may get hired out. I mean, that's happened. I'm going to skip past the video blogs. I should just make a note to everyone that there are people doing video on these issues. The housing situation, there's a lot going out. And there's also that very famous South African engineer who's been running around talking about how they knew that this was going to happen. And he shows you in his videos, he shows you the graphs and the charts. And he has taken it upon himself to go directly to the internet user. Instead of, he lectures too, but he's doing it directly via his own video blog. And that's levies.org, which has become a cause more than a video blog, but still, in essence, it's a video blog. There's levies.org. I'm going to move past it. My final, more or less final thought is what's amazing, everything I've just talked about, I've talked about my own stories, but these issues are being written about by people. You could learn about this without going there, although it is interesting to go. And in many ways, a movement has been born in New Orleans, and that is the movement of the bloggers. From the people who have get together and rebuild houses together for friends or for strangers. But they also have become a force that the newspapers pay attention to, that the mayor has to respond to. I mean, they're powerful. They're getting powerful as people start to recognize them. The trick and the question is, are people going to be concerned about, to want to read, to want to know? There's this weird thing in this world that we live in where we could know and have the information about people who are being oppressed, about people who are even being killed or suffering, and the weird part is we can kind of act like we don't know, or we can choose not to look. And that's the big question with these types of blogs in general. The information is out there. It's a lot. The question is, do people want to know, or would they prefer to imagine that this isn't happening? You'd much prefer to think New Orleans is being rebuilt, and it was a storm that damaged the city. It wasn't the federal government. So a movement has been born. They have this fantastic conference. I say fantastic in small letters. It's very modest. And that's at the end of the month. It's called Rising Tide. And they bring the bloggers, of course, with all their different backgrounds, but they also bring activists. And they get together and they talk about strategies for what they really would like, more people to know what's going on in New Orleans and what's happening now. Not the storm a year or two ago, but what's happening now. So that's Rising Tide. I've said most of my conclusions, so I'll probably leave it at that. Oh, I did want to mention this, and this is kind of far-fetched, but I like being far-fetched. That's why I'm at this conference. It's one of these things, this may become a new method of gentrification, Imagine, there are governments somewhere that, or perhaps businesses even, large-scale contractors, who are paying attention to what's happened in Katrina and kind of going, this is a way to make a lot of money. By the way, all that land that they acquire, the city, they could do things with it. It's very close to the sea, and that area has a lot of oil exploration, but the houses were already there before the oil was discovered and the gas. So if they confiscate all these houses, I'm not saying I know they're doing this, but they could sell it to perhaps an oil company that wants to build a refinery, because that's prime real estate. It's just that these damn people have been living there. And worst of all, they're poor people. Man, we hate that because we don't make any money off of that. Now, this is just, I'm just being facetious. Am I being facetious? That's a big word. But this is the question, is this something that a lot of, in other disasters, following other disasters, that they'll repeat? And actually, Iraq starts to look a lot like it in terms of, yes, it's a disaster for people, but it's a big success for certain businesses. And I start to wonder, could that happen in Europe? It hasn't, to my recollection in the last few years, it hasn't happened. But I bring it up just because I think we should always be aware that it's possible. I'll stop there. I guess we could take some questions, right? But remember, I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy telling a story. I don't know. Yeah, I don't see. Well, you could also just ask me and see me. I don't know if there's enough time. Can I show the videos? I don't know how. The other thing is, what if they're boring? You're going to be disappointed. They're not exciting. I mean, this is not always exciting. That's one of the problems. But this is just a clip, not the full video. I think I stopped it here. Or I can. I realize, and it's one of the good things that I didn't play the video earlier, but now I did, it's a hard accent to understand. I thought about that as I did this. No? No? Oh, you guys are so good. Okay. But he's talking about what I was talking about, the whole pyramid of, if you want to come home, then how can you come home if you don't have these following things going on? And if you stop these things from going on, how can I ever come home? The other vlog was the very, he's not exciting, the levees.org guy. Now he uses graphs. It's like the Weather Channel. graphics.